Hello YouTube, I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney on this channel. I cough a lot, and I'm going to try to mute it when I cough. But more importantly, on this channel, I answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answer they need from an employment attorney. We have a question here. Well, first, as you're watching this video, which I believe will be Tuesday morning, around 9:30 a.m., I will be in my office waiting for something called a curtailment to begin. A Con Edison curtailment, no less. What is that, you might ask, if you're not from New York City? It is something that happens when the quasi-governmental body, that is Con Edison, I believe it's operated by New York State, in conjunction to some extent with New York City, fails to create the infrastructure to create enough electricity to power New York City. So they have to decide what they cut. Obviously, you don't want to cut the subway. You don't want to cut the life support in the hospital. There's those choices you got to make, right? If you're not going to provide enough power, you got to decide who doesn't get. Historically, they cut power from poorer neighborhoods, which in New York would generally be neighborhoods where people of color congregate, because New York plays at equity but doesn't live it. Now, they're doing that a little bit less now. A little bit less. They're still pretty fucky, if we're being honest. But what they're doing now is they're doing a curtailment, which is at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, office buildings must turn off their AC. If you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, Vince, it looks like you're in a giant 50-story greenhouse. Yes, I applaud your abilities of observation. I am. And it's going to be 96 degrees out tomorrow, and the sun is going to be coming through those windows, and it's going to be absurd. Now, not right off the bat, mind you, because the AC will be on until 1 p.m. So when the AC goes off, it's a race to see if you can get your work done before it gets too hot in here and basically incapacitates you, right? Eventually, you'll become dehydrated, you'll sweat out, and you'll just perish, I presume. I don't wish to perish, so I will be in a race to get out of New York. Not really. I'm not leaving New York today, or the day that you watch this. But I'll be in a race to get out of the office. Everyone in New York who's on their curtailment list for their building being a greenhouse, essentially, for the day, is making plans to get out early, and they're all going to go, I don't know, get drinks or get food, whatever it is the New Yorkers do now. So that's my day tomorrow. The day that you're watching this is probably how the rest of that day is going to go for me. I'm just complaining because for some reason people watch this channel, and so I get to complain. But let me answer the question. Let me provide some actual value. Excuse me. That mute button is invaluable. Okay, so CMA 15D or I5D, I can't tell, asks us, this is a comment posted on a video entitled, what does it cost a company to defend employment cases from the EEOC all the way through federal court? And CMA asked us, that number you gave isn't taking into account the cost of having executives come to trial, is it? And CMA is correct. It is not really taking into account the cost of having executives to trial. And I can tell you why. Often, important executives, like really high-end executives, will not be directly involved in employment discrimination or sexual harassment matters. Now, they can be, and certainly we have cases where they are, and CMA is absolutely correct that that can be a big motivator in settlements, right? Getting to depose we'll talk about somebody who's perished, so it can't possibly touch on one of our cases today. Like if you were suing Apple and you got to depose Steve Jobs, there's a decent chance Apple throws a couple mil at you to not inconvenience Steve Jobs, right? Or to not expose Steve Jobs to risk or some nasty attorneys or whatever it is, right? So CMA is correct in that can be a factor. However, in most cases, the executives who are implicated are in reality middle managers. That is much more common. And the cost of sending a middle manager to get deposed or to testify at court amounts to, hey, you, do what you're told. It's the whole cost. Their salary. They're already on the payroll. You're losing a day of their labor because they're off testifying, but in reality, what does that really amount to? 2 hours of work? And what does your average salary employee do during the day? 2 to 4 hours of work. Oh, we lost 2 to 4 hours of production from a middle manager. They'll make it up later, right? It's not that big a deal if you're not dealing with a very important executive. So to your point, CMA, if you can get a really important executive, and you're going to need some good reasons as to why you should be able to depose them or make them testify at trial, they're going to have direct involvement. They're going to have direct knowledge. Like these, you're going to have to show these things. There's going to be arguments. There's going to be motion practice. The defendant is not going to want to produce an important executive. So you're going to have to convince a judge why they must, why this executive in particular is the correct person to be testifying in this case, right? And if you can convince the judge of that, then yes, you will be able to depose that person. And yes, that can drive a valuation slightly higher or greatly higher, depending on the importance of that person and where they're located and all the things you're doing, all the factors in play. But don't just assume that's going to be the case, right? There's a lot of people who come into my office and they say, I have a good case and I want to sue and I want to depose Jeff Bezos. It's like, great. Okay. I love that. I agree you have a solid claim. Bezos, Mr. Shitty Urban Cowboy Hat himself. What does he know about this? Well, he makes the final calls and everything. No, he doesn't. That's not a thing. That's not how business works. What does he know personally about your situation? Well, I shook his hand once. Okay. That's not a thing. That's not going to get us there. Okay, well, I wrote him an email about what was happening to me, about the workplace discrimination, the workplace sexual harassment, the retaliation, whatever it was. Okay. Did he respond? Well, no. Okay. How do you know he read it? Well, I sent it. Okay. But there's filters. And I would imagine Monsieur Cowboy Hat Bezos is getting millions of emails per day. Hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, I don't know. But I would imagine there's some pretty industrial-sized filters on his email. So I think it's highly unlikely he received your email. And if he did receive your email, even then, I'm not sure we can prove he read it. But even if he read it, I'm not sure that alone would necessarily be sufficient to make Jeff Bezos the correct person to be questioned in your case. It's an argument, and it's not a terrible argument. It's something. But it might not be enough. Realistically speaking, it's probably not going to be enough. Because I'll give you an example. Let's say Monsieur Cowboy Hat Bezos receives your email, forwards it to the head of HR, and is like, hey, know what to do this, take care of it, do the right thing. If I was sitting as an arbitrator and you wanted to drag Jeff Bezos in to question him, I don't know that I would think that was a valid reason to get him in there. Now, my predisposition is probably that I would think it was very funny if Jeff Bezos had to come testify before me. I would be for that. That would tickle me pink. I'm already pink. However, realistically, applying the law, I think it's pretty unlikely that I'd be able to put together a solid reason as to why Bezos, in that scenario where he received your email and just sent it to HR, would have to come in. Not a lot of personal knowledge, not a lot of personal touch involved. There's not a lot of involvement in terms of what he's doing with you, right? So realistically, I think there's pretty good chance the defendants are going to be successful in saying, Judge, why would we turn over Jeffrey Bezos, Monsieur Cowboy Hat himself? Because he's running one of the largest companies in the world. And he is the second richest fella in the world, although not really, because all the richest people don't actually publish their wealth, right? But he's doing great. It's a big enterprise. Let's be honest. It's a big undertaking, right? So Certainly bigger than anything I've got going, right? And I think most judges and arbitrators are going to say, yeah, I don't think this makes sense that we bring in Mr. Bezos. I don't think that really tracks. So it can be hard to get the people you want questioned, deposed, testifying, and you need good reasons and good arguments. And in addition to that, those good reasons and good arguments are going to have to overcome a certain predisposition on behalf of courts to lend a little extra respect to very powerful people. Just something I've noticed over the course of my career. The more wealthy or powerful someone is, the harder it is to drag them in to get deposed. Sure, they have better lawyers, but also judges, there's some perhaps level of deference that I have felt, that I feel I have witnessed, right? Not calling into question the courts, wouldn't dare, not besmirching the profession of the judiciary or the attorneys of the world. Just saying, in my experience, the more important someone is, the harder it is, the higher the bar is to get them deposed. So CMA, it's all relative, right? Depends on how important these executives are. Can you actually get them questioned? Can you drag them in? Because if they're very important, then you're correct. That can really drive the valuation of a case. Not because it's expensive having them come in, having these executives come in necessarily, but because, listen, they could be doing important things for the company. I guess that's an expense. But also, they know where the bodies are buried, so the company's not going to produce them at any cost sometimes. Or just they're all afraid. Like in the idea of questioning Steve Jobs, can you imagine the attorney who's like, hey, Steve, you got to come be questioned? And Steve Jobs was, I think, famously horrific to work for. He would have just fired that attorney, right? So that attorney, instead of going and getting fired, is going to say, hey, I found $3 million. You want $3 million in your case? Because that's how that attorney will save their job, because they're not going to have to produce Steve Jobs on this case, right? Because they lost all their motions or whatever it is. Anyways, CMA, I hope this answers your question. Like, subscribe, comment down below. Share the channel so it can grow. Take care, everyone.